Westwood
This
Village
meeting is
Rotary.
being recorded.
And I will click on Got It here, as we all do. And there's our banner showing Westwood Village. And okay, Tia. And our theme this year, Create Hope in the World. And Gordon McAnally is our international president from Scotland.
What?
And believe it or not, today, everyone, besides being Washington's birthday, it's Happy National.
Steve, you're muted by accident.
Steve is
Steve, you're muted. Can you hear
Steve,
me?
you muted yourself.
I don't think I did, but I'm back. Okay. So today is National Chili and National Margarita Day. So I know what I'm going to have for dinner. And also George Washington's birthday. Our four-way test today of the things we say, think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And our pledge today will be led by Nancy Cohen. Nancy?
Place your hand on your heart and repeat after me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And moving on. And thank you for allowing me to postpone you 1 week, past President Nancy McCready, who will be giving us the thought of the day today. Nancy?
Thank you, President Steve. During my time in Rotary, I've thought a lot about our motto, service above self, because I believe that it truly sets Rotary apart from many other civic organizations, and it conveys the true humanitarian spirit of our 1.2 million members. But I was curious about how it came about. In this club, we are blessed with many long tenured members who are well versed in Rotary's history. But those of us who have not been around as long want to learn and appreciate some of the genesis of Rotary's tradition. So I did some research. I found that early on, Paul Harris had said that whatever Rotary may mean to us, to the world it will be known by the results it achieves. The first National Rotary Convention, which you see on the screen, was held in Chicago in 1910. A Chicago businessman named Arthur Frederick Sheldon laid out the mission of Rotarians in our communities and elsewhere around the world, saying, only the science of right conduct toward others pays. Business is the science of human services. He profits most who serves his fellows best. The following year, at the second National Rotary Convention in Portland, Ben Collins, who was then the president of the Rotary Club of Minneapolis, made it known that his club had adapted that philosophy into their motto, service, not self. Paul Harris then asked him to address the convention and share these thoughts with the larger body that was gathered there. And much later, I'm sorry, let me just back up and say the convention was very enthusiastic about that particular succinct stating of the philosophy. Much later in 1989, the motto was revised slightly to become what we now know as was officially established as the principal motto of Rotary because it was believed to best convey the philosophy of unselfish volunteer service. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Nancy. Well said. Thank you. Okay. Past President Ed, you want to lead the group in today's song?
Yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. I
Okay,
can hear
fine.
you.
For some reason, I can't get my picture, so I don't want to press anything because I'll probably lose the screen. But anyway, I thought because Monday was President's Day, I'd sing a patriotic song, and I'm going to sing My Country 'Tis of Thee. My country of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Appreciate that. And today I'd like to thank past President Tom for being our scribe for writing the windmill. Thanks, Tom. Okay, do we have any visiting Rotarians today? No visiting Rotarians. We have a couple of guests besides our speaker. I don't know if Carol Rosenstein's on yet. Carol, are you out there? Carol invited Father Tim Meyer to participate in today's meeting. I hope she's there. I'm going to look at the participants here. Carol, you out there, Carol? No, Carol's not. Oh, yes, she is. Yes, yeah, Carol's there. Yippee! All right, Carol. Hi. Anyway, Carol will share with us in a few minutes the background of excuse me, I apologize, Father Tim. We also have a guest, Jonathan Bates. Mark, you want to introduce Jonathan? You're on mute. Thank you, Mark.
Hey, I got Michael on the phone too. Rotarians, join me in welcoming a prospective member, John Bates, who will also be joining us next week at Hillcrest. And at the same time, Michael, are you having trouble getting on the meeting? All right, it should be in your email, the link.
It just came in.
Okay, you got it.
Good deal.
Michael Newman will be joining us shortly, President Steve. Anyway, so
Better late than never.
right. Welcome, John. I hope you have a wonderful time here. Look forward to meeting you in person next Wednesday night at Hillcrest.
Thank you all for having me. Just I don't know if you want to I should give them a little bit of introduction about myself. I work on campus here at UCLA. I am a senior fund manager, which means I deal with finance and contracts and grants. My department's the Department of Community Health Sciences and the Fielding School of Public Health. I've been at UCLA for 13 and a half years, and I've been doing contracts and grants for the last 4.5 years.
Well, thank you so much for coming, Jonathan. And we're looking forward to seeing you Wednesday evening at Hillcrest Country Club. Outstanding.
By the way, President Steve,
Yes.
Jonathan, do you go by John or Jonathan?
I go by Jonathan.
Okay, good. All right.
Thanks again. Nancy, past President Nancy, want to share a little bit about the plaque that we're looking at right here? You're muted, Nancy. Nancy, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Sorry.
There you go. No worries.
I muted myself because I'm at the office and my phone might ring. So anyway, as the club knows, we have provided support to the Givat Haviva International School in Israel for several years now, thanks to Mark Rogo, who brought us all together. And this school's work in creating leaders of the future who are oriented toward peace and problem resolution is more important than ever. And they also were the recipient of a global grant. I think was it last year, Mark? And so in gratitude to Rotary International and to the Westwood Village Rotary Club, they created a plaque which they have installed at the school in a public in a public arena. So it was a lovely gesture of them. And we are hoping in a future meeting to bring Narit Gary, one of the co-founders of the school, and some students on to speak to us. But unfortunately, Narit is away today, so she couldn't participate. But I continue to be very impressed with the work of this school and really value our connection. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you very much. Okay, continuing on. Just a few announcements. This Saturday, again, is the third and last district breakfast at Da Vinci High School down in El Segundo. For those of you who are interested in attending but haven't yet registered, please do so as soon as you can. I think we have about a contingent of 5 or 6 of us going there, but we'd love to see more of you there as well. Wednesday night is our social at Hillcrest Country Club. Right now, our count's around 40 people. I think Mark is just about ready to lock down the number with the caterer over at Hillcrest. So, and there are several of you who still haven't given him the final word about whether or not you're going, and whether or not your spouse or significant other or guest. We'd love to have guests there, prospective members. So please, if you haven't responded, either yay or nay, please let Mark or me know, and we'd appreciate that. We're real excited. The district governor will be there, and it should be a real fun evening. Lot of great fellowship that evening. Next month, Thursday, March 21st, I believe at 4 p.m., we'll have the judging of the Pageant of the Arts over at Uni High. And I know Diane has already signed up quite a few of us to be judges. So please, I'm not asking you, I'm offering you the opportunity to participate in something that you're going to find a lot of fun. It's going to be it's a real enjoyment watching these young people, whether they're sing, play instruments, debate, dance, artwork. It's a great afternoon, let me tell you. All right, moving on. Then next, the 27th, more on this day of Rotary Day of Service is Saturday. It'll be a cleanup, quite possibly down at the beach. We might just do it in because it's a Rotary Day of Service. We might just do another Westwood cleanup that day. As I mentioned before, we formally started the meeting. Is May 3rd is the Dodger baseball game, Rotary District 5280. And for those who are interested, the Dodgers are winning 8-0 in the bottom of the first. So it sounds like it's going to be a great year if this is any indication. The next day really is the district conference is the May 3rd through the 5th. Most of Friday is taken up by the Dodger game. So really the business and the fun part of the actual conference will begin Saturday, runs until lunch on Sunday. So please register at the District 5280 website. It's at the downtown Biltmore Hotel. Marcia and I will be spending both nights there. We've never spent a night at the hotel. We've been there numerous times, but never to spend a night. So we're really looking forward to that. Again, on just repeat, on the May 13th will be International President Gordon McAnally will be in our district. We'll have lunch at Beverly Hills Hotel that day. It's $150. We will be dark that week. So if you decide you don't want to participate on Monday, we still will be dark that Thursday. But that Sunday night, it says May or June here for the Sip and See. But in fact, we now have a time and date. Thank you, Chris and Rose. We'll be having the Sip and See, which was postponed from the fall, on May 19th, Sunday, May 19th at 5 o'clock. So that's going to be like our meeting that week. We'll be at Chris and Rose's on May 19th, Sunday, 5 p.m. for the Sip and See. Sipping wine, having appetizers, and also viewing the Pacific Ocean, which you can see from Chris's balcony. We're also talking about a golf tournament, just not golf tournament, golf outing. I mentioned it last week and I got several hands. So we'll be scheduling that too. And I understand there's some kind of a demotion party on Saturday, June 22nd. I'm not sure I'm in town for that, but I'm sure you guys will have a good time for that. Any other announcements? Oh, by the way, I was just kidding. I'll be there. Any other announcements by anybody? Talk up, speak up, or forever hold your peace.
Marcia
Okay.
Hunt had her hand up and she's
Oh,
still.
okay, Marcia, please.
Hi.
You're
Oh, I
muted.
was just going to say on For the pageant of the arts, I'll be in town and I would love to participate in that, to be, for the, when you need judges and things like that
Mhm.
again.
Okay.
Okay.
Diane, I think Diane's here. Yes, Diane's on. Diane, we'll put you on the list. Any other volunteers at this point who would like to commit to being there on the 21st? Okay, if anyone else, just let Marcia know, let me know. We'll put you on the list. We still have some openings for judges. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Marcia. And welcome back to LA. Are you in LA or are you still
No,
in
I'm in Arkansas.
still in Arkansas? But at least you're in the United States.
Yes, I'm in the United States right now.
Good enough. I know. Actually, Marcia, just give us about 2 minutes, if you don't mind, about where you've been and who you've met.
Oh, well, I just about a week and a half ago got back from London. I was at the Presidential Peace Conference, which was 2 days long. It was February 9th and 10th. And I met President Gordon McAnally, and he's a really nice guy. In fact, we ate lunch. He was sitting across the table from me, and I was sitting next to his wife at lunch for the first day. First day was mainly, there were only about 40 people there, the invited situation, and they mainly spoke about ICCs, which the intercountry committees, which the international really wants to grow those, and they've been very effective. And you guys know what the first ICC was, don't you? It was back in like 1946. And it was France and Germany was the first Rotary ICC that they started. They started back in 1946. And many countries, there's a lot, I think there's 13 USA ICCs. I know there's Turkey, it just started, and Mexico, and a lot, other countries. I could get a list. I don't. But it was really great. And the next day there were 750 people there, and I felt I was in the United Nations or something. Everybody, it was a huge room, and it was just really so much information. My mind was exploding at the end of the day. And the president spoke twice, and he's just a really nice guy. And I was during one of the coffee breaks, passed by him, and he talked to me for a second and asked me how it was going, and for me, and he's just a really, really nice guy. If you can go to this thing on May 13th, which I think I will now be able to, I think my plans are changing here, and so see him again. But we talked about peace. It was the peace conference, and the 8 pillars of positive peace, which I could go into. I actually did a PowerPoint because I spoke about it last Thursday to the ICC USA Turkey group. They wanted me to speak about it, and I'm speaking about it again on Saturday to another group. But the 8 pillars of peace are what really helps positive peace and a country, do better. And I can go into that at another time if you want me to. But
I think at a later time that'd be great. Let's plan on doing it. I think that's very important. I think that's great, Marcia. Congratulations. Thank you again. Okay, continuing on. Yeah. Okay. Birthdays. We don't really have any birthdays of any active members today, this month. So kind of interesting. I wonder what all our parents were doing that week or that month. Rotary anniversaries. Jim Collins, 71 years. Unbelievable. We wish Jim and Carol the very best. Chris Gaynor, 40 years. And Marcia, 15 years. Congratulations to both Chris and to Marcia. And wedding anniversaries. We have an anniversary. Our new member, Sean, and his wife Jill were married, I guess 25 years ago on this day, on February 7th of 1999. So happy anniversary to the McMillans. Okay, moving on. At this point, I'd like to have Carol speak for about the next 10 minutes, as well as introduce us to Father Tim Meyer. So Carol, if we can maybe over the next 10 minutes share a little bit about where it is with where things are with Music Men's Minds and the VA Golf, the Band of Heroes, as well as introduce Dr. Tim. And I keep saying doctor. I don't know why I'm doing that. Father Tim. Here you go, Carol.
Thank you, President Steve. Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here today. I bring good news about our Band of Heroes on campus at the West LA VA. As you may or may not know, we had our first Band of Heroes pre-COVID in the Home for Heroes. And that was a very contained weekly group that didn't reopen again post-COVID. Now we have another opportunity for a much broader platform on the entire campus at the VA. And we have been blessed to enjoy meeting a new leader of our Band of Heroes, an amazing human being who actually, you call him a doctor as well. He happens to be a captain, and he happens also to have PhDs in molecular virology and molecular neurobiology, and including being a Jesuit priest. And this angel, Father Tim, and I met a few weeks ago. We were connected by somebody who knew we were looking for a good leader for our Band of Heroes. And the story goes that in 1982, Father Tim was studying at the Vatican, and he happened to be singing in a stairwell. And somebody heard these wonderful strains coming from a human being and found this human being and introduced themselves and said, "We'd like you to sing for the Pope at his 5 a.m. Mass tomorrow morning." And Father Tim sang for Pope John Paul II. This is a picture that I can share with you that he shared with me. And I am so proud to be working with Father Tim. I am delighted to be in partnership as we look at a very successful future, bringing music to thousands of veterans on campus at the West LA VA. And as you all know, music is medicine for the mind. Most of our heroes from the VA are suffering from PTSD, and they will all benefit from the power of making music together and socialization. We've started small, and we've already had an invitation for a concert. We have wonderful contacts on the campus. If any of you in the club have VA contacts for us, to open doors as well. But I see a future that could end up with rehearsals at the Wadsworth Theater, where we can really maximize the gift of music to our vets. And the future is rosy. And I'm deeply honored to introduce you all to not only Father Tim, but Dr. Tim Meyer as well, and Captain Tim Meyer. So, Father Tim, I don't see you on the platform because we're in a little square here, but I hope you are here in attendance. And publicly, let me declare my gratitude to you for helping Music Men's Minds and the Westwood Village Rotary Club, who sponsors this beautiful band. Thank you for helping us dream together and actualize the full potential of Music Men's Minds on the West LA VA campus. Over to Father Tim.
Thank you so much, Carol. As she mentioned, I'm Tim Meyer. I am very grateful to be here. Thank you to Rotary for all that you do, especially all that you have done in getting instruments, and equipment so that we can conduct our musical engagements on the West LA VA campus. I did, in fact, sing for the Pope in 1982. I majored in music and biology. Carol exaggerated a little bit. I only have one PhD, but it is in molecular neurobiology. I've been accused of having more degrees than a rectal thermometer. And left the Army as a chaplain major, but I've kept my email address, which is Captain Dr. Father Tim, because I feel that scans better Major Dr. Father Tim. Carol said that we have already been invited to perform on campus, the little group that we have. And my hope is that come the fall, as the VA begins to open, I think the first new domiciliary that's opening will house 800 folks. Well, and then shortly that's in August, and then another one in October will house 500. So my hope is that we will be able, through Music Men's Minds, to bring music to, as Carol said, thousands on the West LA VA campus. And I'm looking forward to the partnership with Rotary continuing and perhaps expanding, because I know that having majored in music myself when I was in college at Kalamazoo College, 40 some years ago now, I'm so grateful I had the chance to do music then, because at the time I recognized the connection in my life between music and my spirit. And I have seen, especially since I joined the Army at age 51 with no prior service, I've seen how music can really help veterans and others who are survivors of trauma. And so to encounter Carol and her Fifth Dementia Orchestra or band on Thursdays in Westwood has been just a delight. And my goal for the West LA VA will be to have something that is at least as vibrant. And I believe that the potential for Music Men's Minds is pretty much unlimited there. And I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this carol. And I thank you to the Rotarians for putting up with me at this meeting today.
Father Tim, thank you for being here today. We look forward to meeting you in person real soon. You're hereby invited to a Westwood Village Rotary Club meeting to meet us all in person. We meet Thursdays at Hillel at UCLA, so right in the community. And we look forward to seeing you, and also literally hearing when we could come and see a performance on Monday, on the Monday. I know it's still working towards that, and we're looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks again.
And Steve, thank you, everyone.
Good to see you, Carol, and thank you, Father Tim. Okay. At this point, I'd like to introduce or have past President Tom Barron introduce our speaker for today. Tom?
Thank you, Steve. Ken Timmerman is an investigative journalist and has worked for a number of news organizations, including the New York Times, Newsweek, Time Magazine, CBS, ABC, and the Wall Street Journal. He has written 4 fictional books and 11 non-fictional true stories of including this one that I've got right here. And that is The Rest is History. I recently read this book and I'm amazed at how Ken is still alive, be honest with you. He starts out by telling of being taken hostage in Beirut, Lebanon, and barely escaping execution by radical Islamists, and finally released when his bilingual French came in handy. He was stationed in Paris and tells of his behind-the-scene adventures into Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Israel, and even the dirty tricks of France during the Cold War period and beyond. Ken encountered terrorists, arms dealers, and spies, and even eavesdropped on conversations with world leaders. Well, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006 for his work to expose Iran's nuclear weapons program. That was detailed in his book, Countdown to Crisis: The Coming Nuclear Showdown with Iran. Ken is considered an old school reporter. That means he does his research. His book is full of unusual characters, places, and events you will never hear about on the evening news. Today, he will give us a glimpse into some of his views on the current Middle East situation, and based upon many years of reporting in that part of the world. Ken, welcome. You're up. Is he muted?
Ken, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Ken.
All right, I didn't see that. Thank you, Tom, for that wonderful introduction. A little bit florid for me. I mean, I'm not sure that, anyhow, but thank you. It was very kind. And thank you, Steve and Nancy and the rest of you for being here. I thought I'd start out with the present day and talk to you. I was in Israel again at the end of November, beginning of December, when they were engaged in a temporary ceasefire, releasing hostages from Gaza. And I was struck, this is obviously, I don't know how many times I've been to Israel, but a lot. And I was really struck this time at how different the country was, how different everything was. The October 7th attacks were unprecedented. It was the largest mass murder of Jews in a single day since the Holocaust. And Israelis got it. They understood that immediately. I took a friend, Ricky Schroeder, who I was introducing around to potentially make a film about the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. I took him to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. And I've been there many times. I'm sure a number of you who've been to Israel have been there. It's a chilling experience. And what really struck me as I looked at these exhibits of Germany in 1941, 42, 43, and Hungary of 43 and 44, deportations, and then the mass murder, the roundup and the mass murder of Jews. What really struck me for the first time, really, was that this was no longer history. This was present day. The events that are chronicled at the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem were played out right before our eyes on October 7th by Hamas in what was truly an openly and well-documented genocidal attack. And it was such a shock to Israelis. It took them weeks just to recover from the shock of losing so many people. And once they did, the big change was in national resolve. Remember, Israel had been in this period of political turmoil right up until October 7th. Mass demonstrations against Prime Minister Netanyahu and talk about this justice reform, and the country really seemed to be coming apart at the seams. And then October 7th happened, and all of that changed in a flash. The thing that unites Israelis, I think, today from left to right is this notion that finally, Netanyahu has put forward and is insisting on every day its total victory. And it's so important because if you look back at the history, and I've reported on many other wars that Israel has fought in the past, I'll tell you a little bit about that in a few minutes. But in all the other wars that Israel's fought, they never fought to victory. They were always brought to an artificial ceasefire by pressure from the United States or pressure from the international community. And each one of those ceasefires imposed on Israel to block it from defeating its enemies set up the next war, And this time the Israelis said, enough is enough. That's it. We're not going to let this happen again. And that's why you hear Netanyahu insisting on total victory. And that's why even to my surprise, the Biden administration, while they were trying to impose some form of ceasefire, they realized that it's going to be difficult to do so, even for them, even for the United States. So if you're interested in more on that, I did a policy paper for, I'm a senior fellow these days at the America First Policy Institute in Washington. And you can see the paper I did is called Israel's War in Gaza and the End of the Two-State Solution. And you can see that either at their website, americafirstpolicy.com, or you can go to my website, kentimmerman.com, and you'll see it there at the end of January. As I mentioned, I've covered many wars in Israel. The first one was 1982, the war in Lebanon, and that's when I went as a young leftist, Paris-based reporter to Lebanon, thinking I was going to be welcomed with open arms by the Palestinians, who were the heroes in that war, and the Israelis, who were, of course, the villains. This is what everybody in the Parisian media, the French media, was saying, and I bought into that as somebody who was then based in France. And I had set things up with Palestinian so-called ambassadors in France and in Greece on my way there. And as you'll see in this book, and the rest is history, which kind of tells that story, you'll see that almost as soon as I arrived, the scales started falling off my eyes. And then, of course, I got kidnapped by Fatah and held in an underground jail with a number of other hostages for 24 days. Among the things that happened to me while I was captive is I was reborn to my Christian faith, and it was only by faith that I was saved, literally dragged out of the darkness into the light, literally, physically, materially, and spiritually dragged from the darkness into the light. And people have asked me sometimes, how did you get out? And the only real answer I can give you is by the grace of God. It was like something out of the book of Acts. A guy walks in after all the officers had left this underground prison. We were getting bombed day in and day out. There were only teenagers with Kalashnikovs who were guarding us, and they were taking people out every day and shooting them in the alleyway. And in that complete, utter chaos, arrives an older man, somebody, you say in his late 30s, 40s, a man of responsible age, let's say, and says, are there any French people present? And I said, well, heads, he's going to get the two Frenchmen there who were working for Saad Haddad, and they want to execute them finally because they figure out what they've done. Or who knows? So I said, if I stay here, I'm going to die like a rat. The building was collapsing on top of us. And then I said, I'm French. And we got out. Ultimately, we got out. It wasn't immediately, but we did get out. And, some people, I guess, would have gone home and gone on to other things. But I got bitten by the bug and was back in the Middle East just months later. This time to Israel. It was my first trip to Israel in the fall of 1982, reporting on both the Israeli side and the Palestinian side in the West Bank, spending a couple of weeks in the West Bank. And you'll read a lot about those stories, people I meet on the ground. This book really chronicles not just those experiences, my experiences as a war correspondent and an investigative reporter, but it also it gives you an insight to over 25 years of investigating the deep state, because that's what it was really all about. I called it the intelligence underworld in the book. That's how we referred to it in the 1980s and the 1990s, this sort of international intelligence underworld, where there would be a mix of arms dealers, intelligence agents, officers, agents of influence, special envoys, occult envoys, hostage negotiations, ransom payments, money getting siphoned off into secret bank accounts, completely corrupt. So you'll read many of those stories in the book, but it also chronicles the story, and again, you see that on the cover, how I went from that guy in Paris, left-wing, left bank, intellectual, pro-Palestinian, to become a Christian born-again Zionist and conservative. So there's a spiritual journey. There's also a political journey in the book, where I wake up to many of the lies that had been told by some of the news organizations that I had worked for. These days, when I make a presentation, I often say, well, yes, I used to be a journalist when it was still an honorable profession. I'm not sure that that is the case today, unfortunately. And I have tried to work with younger journalists to help and coach them from time to time to see if I can impart a few of those values of what I call street shoe leather journalism, being out on the streets, talking to people, talking to, quote, the little people, the people who don't make decisions, but who get decisions made for them, imposed on them by politicians. So there's a lot of stories about Iraq. I was in Baghdad from '84 until '89, off and on, speaking to arms dealers. And one of the big secrets of the book that you'll discover is that arms dealers love to talk. They won't say it openly, they won't brag about things in public, but if you get them in a bar, or especially on a balcony in Baghdad, so they're away from the microphones, they tell you all kinds of stories. I must have met every arms dealer, Western arms dealer, who was selling guns to Saddam Hussein in the 80s. And I also met the heads of Iraq's WMD programs, the heads of the missile programs, the chemical and biological weapons programs, the nuclear programs. I interviewed them for hours on end. They were happy to be interviewed by somebody who actually had some understanding of what they were doing. There's a great deal of, I hate to say it, kind of institutional racism in the U.S. diplomatic corps, in the military up until that point. Iraqis were ragheads. They didn't understand anything. They weren't very smart. No respect. Well, I had a great deal of respect for these guys. They were, in particular, these two, the two generals in charge of those programs, they were extraordinarily talented, incredibly sharp. The French were terrified of them because they knew if they came in and made a presentation about, a new aircraft or new technology or a radar they wanted to sell, and they got a detail wrong, they'd be called out because these guys had done their homework. So they respected the fact that I respected them and opened up. And I think that's perhaps a form of reporting that is become very rare these days, and you'll read a lot of that in the book. You'll also see information about I mentioned the dirty tricks, and I'll tell you one story about reporting in France you probably have never heard before. Because I have never heard it before, and it was astonishing as it was happening. In '92, I was basically PNG'd from France as a reporter, determined persona non grata. And I learned that as I was going to an arms show, which I covered all the time. I was a defense correspondent, among other things. And when I got there to pick up my credentials to go in, they said, "Ken, your credentials have been revoked." I said, "What?" Yeah, your credentials have been revoked. And so he said, "Okay." So I went back home and called my guy, who was the in the cabinet of the defense minister. I said, "Pierre, what's going on? I just went out to Satory and they told me my credentials were revoked." And he said, "Yeah, Ken, it's true." I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, I can't tell you at this point. I'll look into it and get back to you." Well, he got back to me about a week later, and he said, you know, you've pissed a lot of people off. And I said, well, gee, you know, that's kind of my job. I'm not surprised at that. He said, no, 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 you have really pissed some people off. And it took me a long time to figure out what was going on. And it was really not until after I returned to the United States in 1993, went to work on the Hill. I worked for Tom Lantos at the time. I got my hands on a white paper that was being circulated by lobbyists for a French defense company called Thomson CSF. And Thomson CSF was railing against me personally, and the book that I had written at that time about arming Saddam Hussein, called The Death Lobby, How the West Armed Iraq, which was the story of French arms sales to Baghdad, and said everything in the book was untrue. They had never sold radar. They had never built a training plant for Iraqis in France, and never done all these other things. And I said, boy, that's kind of curious, because the people who told me those stories and took me to visit the training facility in France were actually Thomson CSF executives. But leaving that aside, they were very upset because I had published a photograph in a confidential newsletter I was then publishing, taken in Baghdad at Saddam Hussein's famous arms fair in 1989, showing a French Mirage fighter with a Thompson laser designation pod underneath it and a Soviet missile. And they were just furious. Well, it turned out that the French had sold that. It was American technology. It was not French. Thompson was selling it to Baghdad illegally. They were violating the terms of their licensing agreement. And the kicker was they were then engaged in negotiations to buy a $500 million U.S. defense company. And because of the photograph, the Pentagon blocked it. That's what I learned that happened after the fact. But before I got there, when I learned why they were so upset, I did manage to get my colleagues from the Press Association, the Associated Press, and the New York Times and others to write to the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, the Foreign Minister, everybody else. And they restored my press credentials. But it was a very, very dicey time. And for years, I actually had a French FBI minder who would meet with me once a month. And when this started, before this whole debacle with Thompson, he came to me and he said, well, Mr. Timmerman, we're very interested in reading your newsletter, and we'd like to talk to you about, some of the stories. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, we can do this one of two ways. I said, okay, what's the choice? He said, well, either way, I could take you out to lunch once a month and let you pick the restaurant, and I've got a kind of big expense account, so really, please choose a nice one because we can have a nice lunch together. I said, well, that sounds not so bad. He said, or I can call you down to our offices and interrogate you for 2 hours. I said, I really like the idea of lunch. So I had these minders, and we'd go out to lunch once a month, and he'd ask me questions about my stories, and I'd tell him a little bit of background without telling him who any of my sources were. And from time to time, they actually gave me real information about foreign terrorists, a guy named Imad Mougnier, who was involved in killing 241 U.S. Marines in Beirut. I tell that story in the book, and others. But you would never think of a journalist having an FBI minder in this country. Well, now we know, from Tucker Carlson, they don't have minders. The NSA just goes in and grabs his encrypted signal messages and uses them against him, or confronts him with information that he thought he was conveying confidentially with other people. So I wanted to give you just that background of who I am and what I've been doing around the world. I've also been involved as a investigator with the victims of the September 11th attacks on America. And this came out of my earlier book on Iran, Countdown to Crisis, where I had been interviewing defectors from Iranian intelligence. The lawyers got word of that. It was 2004. And they said, well, we'd been planning to sue Iraq because George W. Bush told us that Saddam Hussein was involved in 9/11. And I said, no, he didn't. Oh yeah, he told us that, and we were all expecting to find a trove of documents, intelligence documents, once the United States went into the country, and we got nothing. So now we don't know what to do. We got no case against Iraq. What do we do? Is there a case against Iran? And I said, well, a number of these defectors have talked to me about Iran's involvement in 9/11, but let's investigate. So they unleashed me, and I went traveling around the world to debrief these defectors and other sources. And ultimately, we put together a lawsuit against the Iranian regime that we presented to a New York court in 2011, U.S. District Court in New York in 2011. And we won a $7 billion judgment against the Iranian regime for their direct material involvement in the September 11th attacks. Now, you've probably never heard about that. And the reason that you've never heard about that is because the news media, guided by the CIA and the State Department, did their very best to pour cold water on this whole notion of Iran's involvement. And one of the reasons they did it was because the CIA had prior warning, and this was in the court case. One of the defectors I spoke to left Iran in July of 2011 and went to see the CIA in Baku, Azerbaijan. And he said, my boss, I've taken documents from my boss's office. The Iranians have been meeting with these Arabs from Afghanistan recently. One of them was a guy named Zawahri, who then went on to become the head of Al-Qaeda. He was the number 2 at that point. And then also Saad bin Laden, the son of Osama bin Laden. He described these meetings, and he said, the Arabs are planning, with Iranian help, to launch massive attacks on America. They're going to use civilian airliners as the means of the attack. There will be no Iranians involved directly. You won't see any Iranian fingerprints. It'll all be the Arabs who do it, but it's an Iranian plan. And they're going to hit the Pentagon, the World Trade Center in New York, the White House, Congress, and CIA headquarters. And CIA George, at this point, he was interviewing, kind of looks in his Persian calendar. He said, well, when is this going to take place? And he said, on the 20th of Shahrivar. That's the date that they gave me. And he goes like this. He said, okay, that's the 10th of September. Why don't you come back then when you have better information, more specific information, we can talk again. And he gives them $300 and blows them off. Well, the 20th of Shahrivar, as Rusbeh will tell you, at least in that year, in 2001, was not the 10th of September. It was the 11th of September. And my guy didn't even know that. He always thought, and he thought for years, that he was off by one day. He wasn't. He had the airplanes, he had the Arabs, the Al-Qaeda people, he had the targets, and he had the actual date of the attacks, and the CIA blew them off. And because of that, I call it in the book, in Countdown to Crisis, I call it CIA CYA, covering the backsides. And they tried to do that for years and years and years. I think I can tell you that is beginning to change, and they're starting to recognize that Iran, a quote Shiite nation, predominantly Shiite Muslim nation, has no hesitation whatsoever to work with radical Sunni Muslim groups, Hamas, right? The Taliban, Al-Qaeda, even ISIS. And I think they've finally woken up to that. Or the Houthi, the Houthis are Shias, but I think they've finally woken up to that. But it was a concept which blocked the U.S. intelligence community for decades from understanding the true threat posed by the Iranian regime, not just to its own people, but to the people of the United States through international terrorism. So, Rusbeh, and I'll tell you quickly the story about Rusbeh, then I'll open it up to questions for you and see if there's other things that you'd like to talk about. Rusbeh, because I was involved with Iranians for many years, I set up a thing called the Foundation for Democracy in Iran in 1995 to help the pro-freedom movement in Iran. And Rusbeh, I kind of helped Rusbeh a bit when he first got to this country. I helped his mom get into the country in, what was it, 2001, I think 2001. And we've been friends ever since. So it's well over 20 years. And whenever I come to LA, I always have to stop by and see Rusbeh at the Persian Gulf. And I hope you all will do that as well. Oh, by the way, if you're interested, you can get the book there I left some books with Rusbeh there. So with that, I'll kind of open it up. If you want to ask me questions about current events or future events or past events.
Okay, please speak up, anyone who has a question. First of all, Ken, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences with us. Any questions, anyone?
Yeah, Ken, I'll speak up. So what is the future of Israel and Palestine?
Well, it's a big question, and people have been asking that for 70 years, right? I can say this with confidence. It's not the same as it was a year ago. October 7th changed things dramatically. And while the United States may continue to insist on a two-state solution, or what Linda Thomas Greenfield, the Biden administration's ambassador to the United Nations, called just yesterday a final solution for Israel. I can't believe that she said that. I don't know. I don't know whether she's a closet Nazi or just dumb. And either way, she should not be representing the United States at the United Nations for saying such a thing. But if it's not the same, it's not what it could have been a year ago. There will not be a Palestinian state anytime soon. And there won't be a Palestinian state anytime soon because the Palestinians have shown that they are openly genocidal. And I don't see how anybody in their right mind could force Israel into a peace agreement with a people, even their next door neighbors, who openly declares that their goal is to wipe them all out, to murder them, man, woman, and child, and children, all of them. It's just impossible. I tend to think that we're looking at a generational conflict, a generational solution, and it has to start with reprogramming the children. It's kind of like Moses going through the desert with the Israelites. The old generation had to die off before they could reach the promised land. The problem in today's Palestinian areas is that the older generation is now 3 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. They have been programmed in these United Nations schools with these textbooks of hate and of genocide, to hate Jews, to wish to murder Jews, to grow up to become a martyr, a shaheed. And you cannot have peace with people who have raised their children to believe those things. So I think it's going to be generations before we see a Palestinian state. What happens in the interim will be a form of Israeli military and security control. You'll have some kind of local governance, perhaps under supervision from the Egyptians, the Jordanians, and possibly the Qataris. Although, I have my doubts about the Qataris. If you're giving money to terrorists, as the Qataris are doing, if you are negotiating on behalf of terrorists, as the Qataris are doing, does that make you a terrorist, or does that make you a good guy?
Another question? Speak up for Ken if you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question, Ken. Great talk, by the way.
Thank you.
Do you believe that the Saudis will become closer to the West than they have ever been in the past?
Not immediately. And I think they were really on the verge of it in January of 2021. The Abraham Accords, remember, had just been negotiated, and the Saudis they said, okay, we're not ready to do it yet, but we're getting ready to do it. And then, Biden comes in, and he went out of his way to insult the Crown Prince. He accused him of being a murderer. Now, his intelligence services might have murdered this so-called journalist. He was a phony journalist. He was a Qatari propagandist. And it was a gruesome murder, this guy who was killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But the intelligence report, the CIA report that Biden released about that was it went like this. We know the Saudi crown prince probably has control over the Saudi intelligence services. We know that people in the intelligence service probably went to Istanbul to carry this out. And so therefore he must have known, or he could have known, that it was that's not an intelligence report. That's a political slam. It's a political slur. And he started with that. And then in April of 2021, he cut off arms deliveries, including Patriot missile batteries, to Saudi Arabia. So you have a president who is doing everything in his power to alienate the Saudis and to push them away from Israel and push them into a hardline camp. It's a miracle that it hasn't turned out worse than it has so far. So they are not going to make a deal with Israel soon. I think it's going to take quite some time. I doubt it's going to happen while Biden is president, although he's tried to make amends with them. But I think the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, I think he authentically does want to make peace with Israel. I think he recognizes he's a new generation. Remember, his old generation has died out. His father was an anti-Semite. Right? His father an anti-Semite. But he is of a new generation, and I think he truly does, not necessarily become pro-Western or Westernized, but he wants to live in the region with Israel. He recognizes, as the Emiratis have recognized, that Israel is the source of capital and the source of intellectual capital, and is a force for modernism. And without Israel, they can go back and live in their tents, like the Houthis are doing in Yemen. With Israel, they can build Dubai.
Okay, thank you, Ken. One last question, Christine. I understand you have, we'll ask our last question of the day.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
I'm a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. My dad was in Vietnam. Grandpa was in World War II. My question for you is, with all of this stuff that's going on with the sea, are they aware of what they're doing to the veterans when they come home and what it's costing the taxpayer? I have gone to every administration. I called the White House hotline, and it's like, the mechanisms are so obvious. And I know people on both sides that genuinely care about our veterans, but we can't get access to the most basic care. And when you said you came back from nearly dying, like, you did it, you made it back. Why are so many of us dying? I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I was not ruined physically, luckily. It was just, they broke my back, but I got over that. Look, I think certainly under President Trump, there were efforts made to reform the VA, but it's like, what do they say? It's like an aircraft carrier. Try turning an aircraft carrier around. That's what it's like. It's a huge bureaucracy. And one of the biggest reforms that Trump made was to allow veterans, if they weren't getting what they needed from the VA, to go to private care and get it, on the private marketplace and have the VA pay for it. I don't know what the status is of that today, but these forever wars. So I have friends who deployed 5 times, 6 times. Thank you for your service going to Iraq and Afghanistan. Valiant of you to do so. Very courageous. And there were moments in both of those wars when they were absolutely depressing. Where the prospects were completely depressing. We went in as victors, and we left as we very, very nearly left defeated. We certainly left defeated from Afghanistan. If they hadn't turned it around during the awakening in Iraq, we would have left defeated from Iraq as well. But we're defeated there now. Iran controls the country. Iran controls Iraq, and you have to wonder. So what we did, we liberated the country from Saddam. We turned it over to the Iraqis. I wrote another book about this called Shadow Warriors, and the whole plan of that war was to turn it over to the Iraqi Governing Council and then say, hey, it's it. That's why Rumsfeld said in May of 2003, we finished, we've done it. We've won the war. We declared victory. We're out of here. And then Bush appointed this guy, Jerry Bremer, who arrives in Baghdad on May the 2nd, had never been to the Middle East before, never been to Iraq, and does 3 things. He dissolves the Iraqi army, He dissolves the Ba'ath Party right down to the level of school teacher, and he dissolves the Iraqi governing council and says, I am now going to be the proconsul. And then a month later, he wonders why there's an insurrection. You got 350,000 guys with guns on the streets and no salaries. That's just from the army. In addition to all the Ba'ath Party people who can't get work at all. And then he wonders why he's got an insurrection. It was sabotaging of a strategy that had been put in place over 4 years earlier. You know, they were, and I talk about that in Shadow Warriors. It was a pretty well developed plan. Turn it over to the Iraqis and get out. Well, we didn't, and we put in a proconsul, and then the rest is history.
All right. Well, Ken, I'm gonna have to bring it to a conclusion there. First of all, again, thank you so much for speaking to Westwood Village Rotary. Very interesting talk, a lot to think about. I look forward to maybe seeing you in person the next time you're in LA. We'll see if you can come by on Thursday to Westwood Village Rotary, and it's really neat that you have that connection with both Tom and with and especially with Roosbay.
Sure, well, I appreciate that. And again, Roosbay has books. If you want books, you can get them for $25, which is off of the cover price. I can't sign them because I'm over here, but you can go to the Persian Gulf restaurant and get them with Roosbay. You know, he has the actual physical copies. It's cheaper than getting it from Amazon.
Fair enough. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again, Ken.
Thank you.
So our program next week will actually be we're dark next Thursday because next Wednesday night we'll be at Hillcrest Country Club for our social evening, our evening of fellowship. It promises to be a lot of fun. Remember, you've all everyone who's RSVP will be on the list because when you get to Hillcrest, they're going to be very strict in making sure you're on the list. So a lot of security there, needless to say, but that's at 6 o'clock. And so it'll be a fun evening. And I look forward to seeing everyone who has signed up. And if you're interested and you haven't signed up, please consider it and let Mark or I know. And then a thought for today. I always like doing a famous quote, and this is from George Washington. George, as you all know, was born on February 22nd, 1932. And I think it's very appropriate in today's day. And the quote is, "Be Americans. Let there be no sectionalism, no north, south, east, or west. You are all dependent on one another and should be one in union. In one word, be a nation, be Americans, and be true to yourselves." And with that, I wish everyone a wonderful weekend. I again thank our visitors and our speakers. Very much enjoyed today's meeting. This will be our last Zoom meeting for the foreseeable future. I hope we're not called back into Zoom for any reason. So with that, I'd like to say we're adjourned, and I'll see everyone on Wednesday night. Goodbye.